From the pre-independence about women riots to EndSARS and the ongoing hardship protest in Nigeria, Nigerians have used protests to demand change. But while this is an important democratic right, there usually are reports of destruction of public infrastructure, mass looting of both public and private property, and killing of protesters and law enforcement agents. In the story, Just Nigeria's Wale Fakile provides a timeline of protests in Nigeria and engages with activists to weigh the impact of the protests on achieving social change.
I find it very difficult to feed my children, which is not supposed to be.
You can't feed a baby and ask the baby not to cry.
You're hungry.
A charged atmosphere and the sheer willpower of Nigerians. There have been violence, casualties, and the presidential address, but these protesters are resolute. It's another page in Nigeria's checkered book of resistance. Their wheels, power and politics collide. Nigeria is witnessing widespread protests as citizens demand relief from skyrocketing living costs induced by rising fuel prices and devaluation of the naira. The demonstrations tagged End Bad Governance, which began last week, have spread to major cities. This latest mass action has deep roots in the country's turbulent protest history. EndSARS was triggered by the brutality of police unit Special Anti-Robbery Squad, SARS. Government eventually disbanded SARS, yet the mass action continued as protesters pressed for more concessions. What followed suit was violence and authorities forcefully quashing the demonstrations. Hassan Soweto was one of the organizers of EndSARS in 2020. He is now back on the streets as the leader of the End Bad Governance protest in Lagos, Nigeria's commercial hub.
The lessons of EndSARS have been learned. What we don't have yet is a uniformity of that lesson percolating around. Because even in these protests, you could see a level of organization far above what we saw with EndSARS.
The Special Anti-Robbery Squad no longer exists, but calls for better policing remains. So, has anything changed?
A slave in bondage has no other option but to keep trying to be free. Because bondage itself is painful, the path to freedom is equally painful. And that is what has been keeping people like us active at the barricades.
What Nigerian government has been subsidizing is corruption. Yes. The cartels are there with them.
The protest was birthed by the removal of fuel subsidies, resulting in price hikes. President Bola Tinubu, then an opposition leader, was one of the powerful voices egging protesters, and the government's response was initially heavy-handed, but eventually a part of the subsidy was reinstated. 12 years down the line, President Tinubu has fully removed fuel subsidy.
The first subsidy is gone.
Owe Lakemfa was one of the organizers of the Occupy Nigeria protests.
We tried to control the protests as much as possible. But we also had casualties because in a number of cases, the security forces and overzealous military tried to force people off the streets.
June 12th is the most contemporary historical reality in Nigeria.
The June 12th protests were sparked by annulment of the 1993 presidential election adjudged Nigeria's freest and fairest and believed to have been won by late Moshood Abiola. The military regime's response was brutal, throwing several activists and journalists behind bars. However, the protests marked a turning point by strengthening opposition to military rule and Nigeria's return to democracy in 1999.
Stability.
Ayobi was one of the activists on the front lines.
From my day, we were the military must go. It's not complicated. We want to return to democracy.
protests are a vital tool in a democracy, allowing citizens to hold leaders accountable and push for change. But these movements have been marked by both victories and persistent challenges in Nigeria. The outcomes of these demonstrations have often hinged on a complex interaction of factors.
It's fairly quicker if economic demands are on the table for government to respond. When the protest is driven by social demand for social reforms, sometimes it could be very polarizing.
So it's a question of whether you, as the person who is organizing a protest, want to see your own protest sustained, or whether what you actually want is a reaction from the government, not to accede to your demands, but a reaction in terms of violence.
When you have a democratic regime, dissent to its policy should be expressed within the context of the law. And the response of the regime correspondingly should also be within the context of the law.
While the ability of this movement to ignite meaningful reform has been uneven, their cumulative impact cannot be underestimated.
The sharper the demands are, the higher the chances that they will succeed within the protest.
Organization decides the success and failure of any form of protest.
The role of Nigerian law enforcement officials, especially the police in the protest, is complicated. Corruption and lack of accountability both compound the perception that security forces are an extension of politicians. This has led to deep-seated mistrust between the public and police, often leading to brutal confrontations during protests.
When people try to infiltrate and disrupt, you are going to have violence, because when they attack, the mainstream protesters will think they were sponsored by government or somebody sympathetic to government.
Government will respond by saying, okay, deploy security forces, mobilize security forces to quell the protest. And it's like putting petrol on a raging fire.
And so the police or the security forces are there to ensure law and order. In ensuring law and order, it doesn't mean that you should start shooting at people.
Nigeria requires all hands on deck.
Sunday, 4th August, President Bola Tinubu urged protesters to leave the streets and come to the roundtable. The demonstrations were slated to hold for 10 days.
I hereby enjoin protesters and the organizers to suspend any further protest and create room for dialogue.
If dialogue is going to be had, what exactly does President Tinubu not understand in the demands that we are making?
You have to be able to dialogue rather than just say, these are our demands. We want 190 petrol, we want 300,000 minimum wage. And if you don't do that, then we're not ready to talk.
When we are talking about different coalition of randomly coupled together organizations, having a dialogue with such a protest movement is always very difficult.
The End Bad Governance agitation has degenerated into violence in some parts of the country. Police say no fewer than 7 people have been killed so far.
When you have a protest that is end bad governance in an environment of partisan politics, you're going to have some people say, no, it's not bad governance. So
what government could do is to also concretely demonstrate goodwill.
The important thing is to respect ourselves. That is, government respecting the people and the people respecting the government, and finding solutions, because that's what we all want.
Protests play a vital role in amplifying the voice of the people and keeping government accountable. As Nigeria navigates its political and social challenges, the importance and appropriate use of this powerful democratic tool must be fully understood by agitators and those at the helm. Wale Fakile, Just Nigeria.
Interesting conversation there. But do you feel like a protest has influenced social change? Share your thoughts with us on X at Just Nigeria TV. We'd like to hear from you.